Hey, welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Andrew Maffettone, who is the founder and CEO of BlueTuskr. That's BlueTuskr.com. BlueTuskr is a full-service marketing company for e-commerce sellers. Now, Andrew is also the host of the E-Com Show podcast. He has been in the digital marketing industry for over 15 years. He's helped all sorts of businesses, brand new startups, nine-figure brands, and so on. So, Andrew, glad to be speaking with you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the intro.
Appreciate you too. And so what has you passionate? What has you focused? What has you turned on these days when it comes to e-commerce?
Our main focus, at least in the recent future, has been pretty much from an omni-channel approach. A lot of sellers, we're not in COVID anymore. It's not just gangbusters. It's not like everyone's placing orders online all the time. Conversion rates aren't what they used to. But the competition is still there. So cost per clicks are up. So you've got high customer acquisition costs. So, the days of just throwing product up on Amazon and making $1 billion is just not happening anymore. So we take a really strong approach at helping e-commerce sellers diversify. So they're not so reliant on Amazon. We help them focus on an off Amazon approach, whether it's on their own Shopify site or something like that. We're looking into other marketplaces like Walmart, eBay, Wayfair, Chewy, that kind of stuff.
Wonderful. So don't just rely on Amazon, be on the Shopify, be on the Walmart, be on the Wayfair. And then I imagine that also involves kind of marketing at other places as well, right? You mentioned the cost per click. I imagine that there's a lot of like social media, paid ads, SEO sorts of things just to get this omni-channel you're talking about.
Yeah. So really what I kind of refer to is, especially on these marketplaces, they only have so much real estate, right? They only have so many products and so many listings, which sounds limited, but when you're running ads and you're getting thousands or hundreds of thousands of impressions a day, there's only so much real estate. So they really start to kind of limit you. Whereas from an off marketplace approach, you've got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, you've got email marketing, SEO, Google, Microsoft. There's a ton of different ways to do this. And really what happens is the customer journey is so fluid, right? We actually did a test a couple of years ago where we had a client of ours with a really good sized budget. They were a big client. And we said, we're going to do this interesting test where we're going to increase your Facebook advertising budget by 10%. And we're not going to touch anything else. Nothing else is going to change. And I want to see what happens. And what we saw was there was a 6.5% relevant increase based on their usual ROI of revenue that they saw on their website. And their Amazon, even though we didn't touch anything, we left everything running as is, saw actually a 5% increase. So we did actually see a little bit even more of an increase supplementally based on the increase of spend we had. But we realized that even though we weren't driving traffic to Amazon, people were coming from their website and going to Amazon. So people are so fluid when they shop. They go to which they want to see if it's on Amazon or if it's on Chewy or if they can get a deal somewhere. So because of this, what we really started to do is develop these different strategies of taking certain, let's say, an email list or a social media approach or SEO approach or anything, and pivoting that traffic towards whether it's their website or whether it's a marketplace, whatever is relevant for the business at that time. So for on these marketplaces, let's say Amazon, it's a great product launch strategy because you can initially put a new product up on Amazon, and normally getting something to get traction is a nightmare. But if you can actually take your existing audience, send them directly to Amazon because you're going to go there anyway, start to really benefit from that 30 to 60 day honeymoon period where Amazon kind of gives you a little bit more visibility than you should have. That actually can really help start to get the organic traffic moving. And then you just pivot your audience back. So it's really about taking the assets that you have available to you and just manipulating your traffic to go wherever the business needs it at that time.
I love that. And that's a really wonderful just business and marketing insight in general. Just wherever you have a list or you have traffic, why not try directing your best people over to it? That way Amazon sees, like you said, they're in the honeymoon period and they see you send this flood of traffic. And also, I imagine that if you have, say you have an established e-com business, you put out a new product, new SKU, and you have a list already and you say, hey, go over and check this out, then Amazon will see this higher conversion rate because they're already your subscribers, and it kind of maybe doesn't fool Amazon, but Amazon sees this like these dedicated fans going to you. And so that's an interesting to think about, as well as your lesson there about how if we're on these multiple platforms, someone might find us on the Shopify site, but then go on Amazon and maybe look for a deal. Or, you mentioned that you're making me think that sometimes I'll go to some website, and if there's something for sale, I'll go to Amazon, and I don't even mind if it's the same price or a little higher. I just kind of like the whole like convenience of Amazon. Like I know all my orders are in one place. I know like if there's like the shipping or like a refund or something, I know it's like in the Amazon ecosystem. So these are good lessons so far, just as far as be on multiple platforms and then move your traffic around to these other places. And so I imagine that some e-commerce brand is already overloaded, right? They're saying like, oh, well, I've got to like set up in all these places. I've got to get all this traffic, and I've got to maybe like round robin all of these platforms that I'm on. And so they could benefit from having a team, a company such as you to sort of do a lot of this work for them, because they're already probably stretched really thin. And so where does BlueTuskr come in with this? Like what sort of service do you do to help move this along?
Really, like, we act as almost like a completely outsourced marketing department, right? Like I spent years in-house, and I was, with good sized businesses, usually like 8-9 figure brands. And I was 9 times out of 10, like the only marketer in-house, or like only a couple of us. And the problem we would have is we'd have these contractors and agencies, and we'd have all these different people we were working with, and we couldn't get them all to talk together because they weren't under the same roof. They weren't working on the same brand. So my Google Ads guy would have no idea what my SEO team is doing, and they wouldn't work together. And it was complicated. And I always wondered, like, why isn't this under one roof? And then I started looking into like, okay, there are full service agencies out there. What are those like? Like that sounds smarter. And most of the time, those are agencies where you get X amount of hours from some kid who's like trying to get into marketing. And he's one of those people that knows a little bit about a lot. And the problem there is that you can't really get that deep in it. And plus it's only one person. So what I wanted to develop was this company where we're almost like an agency of a ton of little agencies. We have a complete SEO team. All they do is SEO. We have a paid ads team. All they do is paid ads. And then there's supplemental ones under there of just the Google ads team, the Amazon ads team, et cetera. We have just the email marketing team, just our website design and CRO team. So it's a house of specialists that focus in certain areas. And the goal of the account strategist is to oversee it all and make sure that it's maintaining in a cohesive way. So really what happens there is when we have these sellers that are on Amazon and Walmart and eBay or wherever else they're at, we look at the business holistically. So everything as one, because when you're marketing, like you can't do the ROI of a billboard. If the billboard says, hey, go to our website, you've got to know that like it's also giving you added brand awareness, and they may buy your product the next time they're in a store and they see it. So you can't really paint the picture of the ROI of specific things. In digital, especially since the iOS change, when attribution became a lot more complicated, is that much harder to actually track what's working. So we come in, we figure out like what resources do you have internally that are already doing well. So maybe they have someone who's like great at SEO. You go, great, we're going to be a kind of like a puzzle piece, help take over everything else and work on an overarching strategy with them. So we come in as like an out of the box marketing department, look at the business as a whole and put these different strategies and campaigns together that can make sure that we're reapproaching traffic and focusing on the business holistically, as opposed to each individual sales channel and each individual traffic channel completely separately.
I love that. That's a nice strategy. So we're figuring that maybe there's many alternatives, right? There's the alternative one is you have all these different teams that really aren't communicating. Alternative two is you have some college kid who's maybe like charging you by the hour and just like doesn't really go very deep. And then your solution here is you have this kind of team and the sub teams, and they all kind of do all the like the ads and the email marketing and all these different parts that need to be done. And then you also look at what's already working. And I love that. Instead of just saying like, we'll throw all this out and start new, you say, well, you've already done some things pretty well. So maybe if they're good at SEO, then you kind of look at that and then like sort of slowly take that over. And so when you look at all of these businesses, when you jump in and you see what they have going on, like what are you kind of seeing as far as the trends? Like, is there anything that's noteworthy either as far as like what they're really doing poorly or what they're doing well?
Yeah. The thing that always shocks me, especially with e-commerce, is the lack of approach on a CRO side. We decided earlier this year, we were going to invest heavily in the CRO because what we realized was we were working with all these sellers, some of them spending tens or hundreds of $1,000s a month in paid advertising, driving traffic to a website that's conversion rate is kind of like meh. And they'd be like, oh, so, my ads aren't doing as well as I want them to be doing. Like, yeah, well, I'm driving them to this website that's broken. So it's kind of like, it was one of those things I was always very shocked of because that's your brand. That's where your home is. That is where if anyone wants to learn anything about with you or if they want to work with you, that's where they go. So the lack of testing and strategy on the website itself is always very like shocking to me when I work with some of these brands that, in some cases it's interesting because you'll work with someone who does like, $500,000-$600,000 a year and they're doing it. Then you've got other ones that are doing 10, 20, $30 million a year and they're like, I don't really care. So it's always interesting that they're willing to just let that spend that they're doing and all their paid advertising go out the window. The CRO side is always really interesting that I'm shocked how many people don't focus on that, constantly trying to improve the conversion rate and the average order value. The other side of it would be I find a lot of times e-commerce sellers, and honestly, you could say this for really any business, sometimes owners feel like they need to be on a certain channel just to tick a box. Like, oh, we have to get on TikTok or we have to be on Instagram or, we have to be doing SEO. But if you really look at the product and the customer that you're trying to target, how they're typically feeling at the time of when they may be ready to purchase and how they're going to try to find that product, not everyone needs to do that kind of stuff. I work with a ton of brands where I'm like, hey, we could do social media if you really want to, but I don't really see this being lucrative for you. Yes, you should probably have a bit of a presence, but we don't need to do anything crazy. Influencer marketing is not going to work for, B2B brands that are just selling to like one type of conglomerate. Like it's just not going to do anything. Or you get these brands that want to invest all this money into Google ads and they're selling, a different type of t-shirt. Okay. That's all it is, a different type of t-shirt. Google has very limited real estate for those types of keywords. So unless you want to go up against like the Hanes and the Gaps of the world, you're probably not going to stand out very much. So it's about knowing your customer and where they're at and how they're feeling at the time of shopping. And those are also really interesting to me when I find these e-commerce sellers that are just like doing stuff because they feel like they have to without looking into the data.
I love that. And so it's like based on maybe the emotion or the peer pressure instead of what the data is. And so those are two huge insights. You're saying insight number one is look at the conversion on your landing page and don't just go for these new creatives I'm going to put out, these new ads. Look at how you can optimize that landing page. That way you're not wasting your ad money. And then you're also saying that number two, don't just be on these different social media channels if it doesn't make sense. Don't let the tail wag the dog. Only go there, like have those social media platforms work for you. Don't just say, ooh, Pinterest, ooh, TikTok, because it's silly when you think about it when you put it that way. And so what has you excited these days about e-commerce? Like there's always something new, like every single day happening with artificial intelligence, but what has you just really energized about the future of e-commerce?
There's two things there because you brought up the AI side. One thing on the future e-commerce, Amazon recently released a buy with Prime button, and you can put it on like your Shopify site or BigCommerce, something like that. And users can come to the site and purchase from someone's website. That person still gets to keep all the data. So they get the customer information and their email and all that fun stuff, but they can also directly purchase through Prime. So they can still get it in 2 days and, they can still benefit from Amazon's return policies and that kind of stuff. I find that very interesting because I think it's the beginning of these marketplaces and these really large shopping carts like Shopify and BigCommerce really starting to work together. And they're really like, since they're all realizing like this customer journey is so fluid, how do we work together to start to take things over? Like to say that Amazon won't acquire Shopify one day, and then all of a sudden, all these Shopify sellers have the ability to fulfill their product in 2 days, which means now everyone's going to want to shop with Shopify on a Shopify website. That's going to become massive. So, from an e-commerce perspective, I find that very interesting. From an AI perspective, there's definitely more and more rumblings, especially from an SEO side of things, that AI is going to eventually take over SEO. I don't entirely disagree. I think there's like people in like, middle of America who are like, no, I'm not talking to this robot and I'm not going to let it do it kind of thing. But I do see how over time AI can really help, especially from an SEO perspective. I mean, we use it ourselves, like in terms of like being able to write copy and things like that for an SEO perspective. I still don't think it's there. We still have to have editors and subject matter experts that are overseeing it, but it is speeding things up. So it's definitely a very interesting how content marketing is going to change over the course of the next like 2 to 5 years as AI starts to get better and better, and as people start to just use AI to search stuff.
Wonderful. And that's interesting to think about, just that buy with Prime button. And it's kind of like I was saying earlier, how like I like to have the whole ecosystem when I go and buy something, sort of like when you see a PayPal button. I trust that more than if I'm just filling in like a credit card on a naked form. And then also interesting, using AI, especially for SEO. And I use Chat GPT daily for my own SEO and for my own copy, and I'm right there with you. And it's kind of the same response when I talk to anyone else about AI. Is it's an assistant. It's a way to get ideas or to avoid looking at the blank page, or say, or feed your existing copy and say, should I change anything, or just give me some new ideas, and you sort of work alongside of it, and then it becomes like a productivity tool. That's a lot more powerful and a lot less of a magic mysterious black box. It's like any other tool that you use to help you out. And so that's powerful, and that's amazing, and that kind of helps give us that advice to just continue on and to get to where we need to go. And speaking of getting to where we need to go, if someone out there is an e-commerce company and they say, man, all this stuff that Andrew's been telling me, I've got like this whole checklist of all these things I should do, but I know that I might get to like 1 or 2 items, and I know I won't do it all, and I could just really benefit from BlueTuskr jumping in and helping me out. How can a company know if they are the right fit and the right size for you, and what's sort of the in store in the future for them as far as working with you?
Yeah, client sizes always kind of vary. We've got some people that are more or less relatively just starting off. We've got others that are, well into 8 figures. So we're a little bit all over the place in who we're able to work with, because really everything that we do is completely a la carte. So even though we act as an outsourced marketing department, we only come in with what we think is necessary for the brand at the time. So we've got a ton of clients where we just do like one thing for them, and we're trying to ease them into, kind of a phased approach. Typically, we tend to work really well with sellers that have a product that they've proved the viability from, and there is a need for it in the market, because that can get pretty expensive. So we usually suggest like you probably want to keep your budget to test all that stuff before you start paying someone to speed things up for you. But yeah, we tend to work with e-commerce sellers on all types of marketplaces, all types of websites. We're Shopify partners, BigCommerce partners. We do a ton of stuff on WooCommerce, Magento, but tends to be really any D2C seller that has their own private label brand, typically doing about $1 million or more annually, tends to be who we work best with. But I've also got some that are significantly smaller and some that are much larger. So kind of all over the place.
Wonderful. So $1 million a year or more is ideal, but even if they're a startup, even they're an up and comer, that's still okay. And so when someone goes and reaches out and speaks to you, what would be an ideal conversation? Like, should they bring to you just like their website, or should they know what a specific problem is, or like sort of what should someone say as far as getting the conversation started?
Honestly, a lot of times it's really just send us your website and let's just chat, because you can look at a website, and my team gets annoyed by this comment that I make all the time, but it's basically like I stand by this wholeheartedly. Every product is different, every category is different, but every business owner and every business plan is also very different. So we could work with 500 different companies that sell t-shirts, but none of them are going to be the exact same, because the owners all want to do something a little bit different. So really, I always like to say, like, just bring the website. If you feel that your marketing isn't doing what you want to do, let's just talk. There's been so many times I sit down with someone, I go, who do you have doing this? Who do you have doing that? Like, okay, really your big problem is you just need someone to kind of bring them all together. Other times it's like, okay, you need help with SEO, you need help with Google Ads, we can come in and start there, kind of thing. But yeah, it's just a conversation, see where the business is at, what we might suggest. Sometimes we'll come out of the conversation too, I'd be like, hey, you know what, we actually you'd be better off just getting someone internally for this, or something along those lines. But it's just a kind of more of an organic conversation most of the time.
Wonderful. And we've all been there where we go into a conversation and we say, I think my problem is this, but then you might say, well, you're on the right track, but it's really that. Or they might say, I'm so hesitant to solve this problem because I know I'll have to do all this work. And you say, actually, there's this really easy solution. So that makes sense to have that kind of organic conversation, because every category and niche and company and brand is different. And so how does someone get this conversation started? How can someone go and reach out and contact you?
Wherever they want, really. Social, all my social handles are at Andrew Maff, or you can do at BlueTuskr. Of course, BlueTuskr.com. You can email me, Andrew@BlueTuskr.com. Whatever your personal preference is, we're pretty much covering most of the gamut right now. So wherever you want, we're usually there.
Wonderful. And so to recap that, on social, that's Andrew Maff, Maff. And then website is BlueTuskr.com. That's BLUETUSKR.com. And then you also have a podcast. So can you tell us about that?
I do, yeah. So we have a weekly podcast. Episodes go out every Wednesday. It's called the Ecom Show. It's on pretty much every podcast channel. You can also go to the ecomshow.com and check out all of our previous episodes. But most of it is just interviews with other e-commerce sellers, learning about their brands, how they got started, how they got where they were. It is really focused on like, teach us some lessons you learned so that everyone listening doesn't have to learn the same lesson. And every now and then we also have just other influencers in the space, that whether they're, kind of more on the vendor side or something like that. But it's a fun show, and it's very similar to this, very just conversational, see where stuff goes. Not that planned out.
Yeah, and the world could use more of that, right? Because we're all say, well, things change so quickly, and it can be scary. And sometimes I don't know what I don't know, and it helps to be immersed. And it also helps to just get the connections, because sometimes you say, instead of learning all this, I can just go to BlueTuskr and have Andrew and his team and sub teams just do this for me. So the Ecom Show and BlueTuskr and Andrew Maffettone. And so as we're winding up and wrapping up our conversation here, Andrew, it's always fun to kind of touch on like a quote or lesson that maybe has helped you, or that you think can help these aspiring e-com brands out there to get to that next level. So what comes to mind as far as a quote or a lesson, just anything that pops into your head?
The first thing that came to my head is something my stepmom has been saying to me for years, and it's, the older I'm getting, the more I realize it, is that cheap is expensive. And it's one of my favorite comments, because it's also one of the things that started our conversation about how we had picked up on CRO stuff earlier this year. There's a lot of e-commerce sellers will, like I mentioned, they'll go to a certain social channel because they felt like they should check a box, or they're on Amazon, they know they want to diversify, so they throw up a website that they had someone on Fiverr do. And doing something so I don't want to curse on your show, so half-heartedly, and like just throwing it up because you feel like you should, ends up costing you more money than actually doing it correctly and investing the money into put together a quality website with a great experience that's better for your consumers than going to Amazon, because you're going to thank yourself from your margins later on. If you're going to get into a social channel, learn about the channel, learn about your customers, and see why they're on the channel and what they want to see, and then really invest into that. So if you're going to do something, don't go the cheap route, go the quality route. Not that you don't have to spend an arm and a leg, you don't have to go the premium route, but always focus on quality, and don't be afraid to put the investment into something if you know that it's the correct area for you to go in.
That's very insightful. Cheap is expensive. Go all in. Don't go halfway. And that's like a Terry Pratchett from Discworld, right? He says like, you can keep buying a $10 pair of boots that just like keeps wearing out, or buy the $100 pair of boots that get you done. And like for years, I had like a $25 little headset like this. And I think I bought like 25 of these over the years because they kept breaking. And sometimes I use it just for listening, but then for the actual like speaking, I got an actual microphone. So I'm right there with you. Yeah, I'm right there with you that cheap is expensive. And so if you find yourself just getting frustrated and having the repeat cost because you thought that it was cheap, well, maybe it's time to just level up a little bit. And that includes either doing it all yourself or having a team do it. So look into BlueTuskr for doing this sort of full service marketing for your e-com brand. Take it seriously. If you know you're falling behind or you know that it's just not really working and cheap is expensive, then go there right now, BlueTuskr.com. And thank you very much, Andrew, for stopping by and just showering us with so many cool facts and insights and advice. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.